The studio buzzed with the usual energy of a high-stakes political interview. The air was thick with anticipation, and the audience leaned in, sensing something different about this one. J.D. Vance, best-selling author, venture capitalist, and now rising political figure, sat calmly, his expression unreadable. Across from him sat an elite journalist, a veteran known for his sharp, often abrasive questioning style, the kind that had left many interviewees flustered and defeated. This wasn't an ordinary interview. It was a duel, a battle of ideologies. Vance wasn't here to play the polite game politicians usually played. He was here to challenge the narrative. The journalist, known for his smug demeanor and thinly veiled condescension, leaned forward, ready to dismantle Vance's arguments piece by piece. His opening line dripped with mockery. "Mr. Vance, don't you think your worldview is dangerously outdated in modern America?" The tone wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. He wasn't asking, he was accusing. The audience felt the tension thicken. Most guests would start defending, backpedaling, or trying to sound balanced, to avoid backlash. But Vance wasn't most guests. He didn't blink. He didn't shift uncomfortably in his seat. Instead, he smiled, not a smile of amusement, but one that said, "You have no idea what's coming next." The journalist leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing as he doubled down. "Your views on American values, they sound like a relic from the past. This isn't the 1950s. Isn't it dangerous to push such regressive ideas in a world that's evolved far beyond that?" His voice carried the weight of someone who believed he held moral superiority. The audience murmured softly, sensing the bait. The setup was clear. Label Vance as outdated, out of touch, and watch him squirm under the weight of the accusation. But Vance didn't take the bait. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unwavering. "Define evolved," he said, his voice steady. "If evolved means a society that's more divided than ever, where working-class Americans are pushed aside in favor of corporate interests, where families are struggling to hold on, and where anyone who speaks up against this gets labeled as outdated, then maybe regression is worth reconsidering." The audience went silent. The journalist blinked, caught off guard. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly. He expected a defensive stance, but Vance wasn't here to defend. He was here to expose. The journalist, visibly irritated, tried to regain control. "So you're saying progress is bad?" Vance leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. "I'm saying progress isn't progress if it leaves the majority of Americans behind." The journalist wasn't ready to give up. He scoffed, shaking his head with a smirk. "You sound like you're preaching nostalgia. The world's changed, people need to change with it. Don't you think that's the problem? People like you refuse to adapt." Vance didn't flinch. He studied the journalist for a moment before speaking, his voice deliberate. "Adaptation is necessary, but who decides what that adaptation looks like? Is it the working families in Ohio? The small business owners struggling to survive? Or is it the elites sitting in studios like this one, telling them what's best for them from a safe distance?" The room shifted. The audience wasn't murmuring anymore. They were silent, locked on Vance. He wasn't just answering the question, he was exposing the manipulation behind it. The journalist's face tightened. He wasn't used to losing ground. He tried to pivot. "So you're saying the media is the enemy?" Vance's response was swift. "I'm saying the media has a responsibility. When you spend more time pushing narratives than telling the truth, you're not informing people, you're controlling them." The crowd awakens, silent support. The audience wasn't just quiet now, they were captivated. Some nodded subtly, others sat frozen, hanging onto every word. Vance wasn't giving them a performance. He was giving them honesty, the kind that's uncomfortable because it exposes what people already feel but are afraid to say. The journalist tried again, his voice sharper this time. "So you're positioning yourself as the voice of the people now. Sounds awfully convenient." Vance's eyes didn't waver. "I'm not their voice. They already have one, they've just been silenced by people like you." The room felt like it shifted again. The power dynamic flipped. The journalist, once confident and condescending, now looked like he was struggling to hold the upper hand. Vance wasn't playing his game. He was rewriting it. The personal attack, desperation sets in. The journalist's smile faltered. He changed tactics, a classic move when arguments start slipping away. "Your background, you were a venture capitalist. How do you reconcile that with this, working man's hero, narrative you're selling? It was an attempt to undermine Vance's authenticity, painting him as a hypocrite. Vance's response came without hesitation. I grew up in a town where jobs disappeared, families fell apart, and people lost hope. I worked hard to get out, but I never forgot where I came from. Success doesn't erase your roots. It makes you responsible for helping those still stuck. The audience didn't just nod now, they clapped softly. It wasn't loud, it wasn't disruptive, but it was real. The studio goes silent, a moment of truth. The journalist, visibly frustrated, took a breath. He tried one last swing. So, what's your solution? What makes you different from everyone else promising change? Vance leaned back, his voice quieter but more powerful than before. I'm not promising change. I'm reminding people they have the power to create it themselves. The system isn't broken by accident, it's designed to keep them powerless. But they're not powerless. They never were. They just needed someone to remind them. The studio went dead silent. It wasn't the awkward silence of a failed interview, it was the kind of silence that comes when people realize they're witnessing something rare, the truth. The journalist's defeat, in spoken admission. The journalist looked down for a moment, his composure cracking. He wasn't defeated by insults or soundbites, he was defeated by authenticity. He mumbled a final question, almost an afterthought. Do you really believe that's enough? Vance's answer was quiet but unwavering. I believe it's a start. The aftermath, a new kind of viral moment. The interview ended. The studio stayed silent for a moment longer before the audience erupted in applause. Not for entertainment, but for something they hadn't seen in a long time, a public figure who refused to perform. The clip went viral within hours, but not for the usual reasons. It wasn't a soundbite or a controversy. It was a reminder that sometimes, the truth is enough to silence even the loudest room.